Tonight, we will not be visiting the marbled halls of the Senate, nor will we stand in the dust and clamor of the Colosseum. Our journey takes us to the roads and rolling plains of the Roman Empire to march alongside the men who built and defended it. We are going to explore a subject that is fundamental to the success of any army, yet is almost always overlooked. A detail of life so mundane, so profoundly ordinary, that it is rarely mentioned in the grand histories. We are going to learn about how the most disciplined army in the ancient world managed the simple, unavoidable, and universal call of nature. Settle into your surroundings. Let the noise and concerns of your day begin to fade. There is nothing for you to do but listen and to allow your mind to drift. We will walk with the legionaries, feel the weight of their packs, and understand the quiet, ingenious systems that allowed them to function. This is not a story of great battles, but of quiet logistics. A story of how order triumphed over chaos, even in the most personal of moments. So take a slow, comfortable breath and let us join the Legion, already on the march. If you enjoy these journeys into the past, I'd really appreciate a quick like or even a subscribe. It helps our small community of quiet history lovers grow more than you know. I'm always curious where you all are listening from, so feel free to drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. It's fascinating to see our global community connecting through these stories. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you would notice is the sound. It is not the sound of trumpets and shouting you might imagine from films. It is a sound more like a river, a steady, rhythmic, and all-encompassing river of noise made of 1,000 smaller sounds. It is the constant soft crunch and shuffle of 5,000 pairs of heavy leather sandals, the caligae, treading on a gravel road. It is the gentle rhythmic creak of leather straps from the heavy packs they all carry. It is the soft clinking of the metal plates of their armor, the lorica segmentata, as they move. And beneath it all, the low, steady murmur of thousands of men, a sound like the humming of a great machine. This is the sound of a Roman legion on the march. Imagine yourself as one small part of this great moving organism. The sun is warm on your neck. The air is thick with the dust kicked up by the thousands of feet ahead of you, a fine, gritty powder that settles on everything. On your shoulders rests the sarcina, the legionary's personal pack, carried on a long pole. It contains your rations of wheat, your cooking pot, a shovel, a pickaxe, and your bedroll. Its weight, a constant, familiar pressure, is a reminder of the discipline that defines your entire existence. Your world is the man in front of you and the man behind you. You are part of a contubernium, a squad of 8 men who share a tent. 10 of these squads make a century, commanded by a centurion. 6 centuries form a cohort, and 10 cohorts make the legion. You are a single, vital cog in this immense, moving piece of clockwork. The pace is relentless but steady. It is called the Iustus Gradus, the regulation pace. It is not a sprint, but a determined, ground-covering walk that can be maintained for hour after hour, day after day. 20 Roman miles in 5 hours was the standard, a pace that would exhaust and break lesser armies. But for you, it is simply the rhythm of your life. The centurions, walking alongside the column, ensure the pace never slackens. Their voices are a part of the landscape, not shouting, but giving low, firm commands. Their vine staff a symbol of the instant, unquestioned discipline they command. Life on the march is a routine of profound monotony. You walk. You rest for a few minutes every hour, and you walk again. You eat on the move, chewing on a piece of hard bread or dried meat. The landscape rolls by, a slow-moving panorama of fields, forests, or barren hills. Your thoughts are simple. You think about the next rest stop. You think about the ache in your shoulders. You think about the nightly camp and the promise of a hot meal and a few hours of sleep. The rhythm of the march is designed to lull the mind, to turn the act of walking into a form of meditation, to conserve all energy for the tasks that lie ahead. When the legion finally halts for the day, as the sun begins to sink towards the horizon, the work is not over. It has only changed form. Before any man can eat or rest, the camp must be built. The same shovels and pickaxes carried on your back are now put to use. In a matter of hours, a patch of open ground is transformed into a fortified town. A deep ditch is dug. A high earthen rampart is raised, topped with a palisade of sharpened stakes. The tents are laid out in a perfect, unvarying grid. Every man knows his job, and he does it without question. This display of disciplined, collective labor is as much a weapon as the swords they carry. It demoralizes enemies who watch from the hills, seeing a disciplined fortress rise from nothing in the time it takes them to cook their evening meal. But within this world of perfect discipline and relentless routine, there is a constant, quiet struggle, a reality that no amount of training can overcome. The human body has its own rhythms, its own non-negotiable demands. A legionary might be able to march for 20 miles without complaint and dig a trench for 2 hours without rest, but he cannot command his own biology. Imagine yourself still on the march. The sun is high, the pace is steady. You have been walking for 2 hours and you have to go to the toilet. It is not a dramatic or urgent crisis. It is a slow, growing and deeply distracting discomfort. A simple, animal need that stands in direct opposition to the perfect collective order of the marching column. You cannot simply step out of line. To do so would be to break the formation, to disrupt the rhythm of the hundreds of men behind you. It would be a breach of discipline, and it would earn the immediate, unwelcome attention of the nearest centurion. The legion is a single entity, and its integrity is paramount. So what happens? What happens when this simple, universal need arises, not just for you, but for dozens, perhaps hundreds of other men in the long, shuffling column at any given moment? How does an army of 5,000 men, valued above all else for its unbreakable formation and discipline, manage this most basic and disruptive of human needs? This was not a minor inconvenience. It was a profound logistical puzzle. An army that could not solve it would be an army that was disorganized, slow, and vulnerable. The health and efficiency of the entire legion depended on finding a calm, orderly solution to this quiet, personal problem. The answer, like everything in the Roman military, was found not in improvisation, but in a system of quiet, predictable, and remarkably sophisticated procedures. The solution, as with all things Roman, was twofold, divided between the established world of the permanent fort and the fluid, ever-moving world of the march. Let us first imagine a legionary return to his garrison after a long campaign, a place like Vindolanda in Britannia, or a fortress along the Rhine. Here, the answer to the problem was not improvised. It was built in stone. The permanent forts were masterpieces of engineering, and this extended to their most humble facilities. Tucked away in a corner of the camp, often near the outer wall and downstream from the main water sources, would be the latrine. This was not a small private outhouse. It was a long rectangular building, open to the air but covered with a roof. Inside, you would not find individual stalls, but long, continuous benches of smooth, cool stone, capable of seating a dozen or even 24 men at once. There was no concept of privacy here. That is a modern preoccupation. This was a place of communal function, much like the baths. The stone benches were carved with a series of keyhole-shaped openings, spaced at regular, comfortable intervals. Below these benches, a channel was dug, and through this channel flowed a constant stream of water, diverted from a nearby river or aqueduct. This running water was the key. It was a feat of hydraulic engineering applied to the most basic of needs, a constant cleansing flow that carried all waste away from the fortress and into a larger drainage system, far from the barracks and granaries. The sound in this building would have been a constant gentle gurgle and trickle, the soothing sound of water in motion, a sound that masks all others. For a soldier accustomed to the dust of the road, this simple, clean and efficient system was a small but significant luxury, a hallmark of the civilization he served. Here too, you would find the famous Roman tool of personal hygiene, the tersorium. It was a simple and practical device, a natural sea sponge, a soft and absorbent material imported from the Mediterranean, was attached to the end of a short wooden stick. After using the latrine, a soldier would use the tersorium, which was then rinsed clean in the very channel of running water that flowed at his feet, or in buckets of salt water or vinegar kept for this purpose. These sponges were communal, a shared tool for the barracks. This may seem strange to our modern sensibilities, but to the Roman mind, focused on practicality, it was an efficient, reusable, and perfectly logical solution. The flowing water was the sanitizing agent, and the system worked to keep the legionaries clean and the fortress free of the filth that could breed disease. The location of these latrines was also a matter of careful planning. They were placed for convenience and sanitation, often near the barracks, so soldiers could use them easily, especially at night, but always positioned so that the waste flowed away from the camp's vital resources. This, however, was the ideal. This was the luxury of a permanent base. On the march, through the forests of Germania or the deserts of Syria, there were no stone benches or flowing water channels. The problem, as you stood in the middle of that long, dusty column, was far more immediate. And for this, a different, but no less disciplined system prevailed. The solution was carried on your own back. It was the shovel or the small pickaxe, the delabra, that was part of your standard kit. The same tool used to build a fortress at night was used to maintain hygiene during the day. The process was a model of quiet efficiency. You would not simply shout out that you needed a break. You would catch the eye of your immediate superior, the decanus, the leader of your 8-man squad, or perhaps the centurion, whose gaze missed nothing, would notice the subtle signs of discomfort. With a slight nod, permission would be granted. This was not chaos, it was a carefully managed rotation. From a century of 80 men, perhaps 4 or 5 at a time would be permitted to fall out of the column. You and a few others would move to the side of the road, while the main body of the legion continued its relentless pace, the river of men flowing on without pause. Under the watchful eye of a junior officer who would accompany your small group for security, you would walk a short, prescribed distance from the road. Here, there was no communal bench. There was only the earth. You would use your tool to dig a small, deep hole, what modern soldiers call a cat hole. The sound would be a soft, rhythmic scrape and clatter of metal on earth and stone, a quiet, personal moment of labor. The discipline was twofold. You were expected to conduct your business quickly, and just as importantly, you were expected to clean up after yourself with military precision. The hole was to be meticulously filled back in, the turf replaced if possible. The goal was to leave almost no trace. This was not simply a matter of tidiness. It was a critical element of military strategy. An army leaves behind more than just footprints. It leaves behind its waste. And that waste, if left exposed, is a breeding ground for flies and disease. Dysentery, cholera, typhoid. These invisible enemies could destroy a legion far more effectively than any barbarian army. A trail of filth would not only sicken the men from the rear of the column who had to march through it, but it would also announce the legion's size, condition, and direction to any enemy scout. Therefore, the simple act of digging a hole and covering it was a matter of strategic importance. It was a form of warfare in itself, a quiet, daily battle fought against sickness and disorder. After a few minutes, your small group would rejoin the column. You would have to walk briskly to catch up to your place in the formation, slipping back into the rhythm of the march. The men of your squad would have slightly adjusted their spacing to make room for you. No one would comment. No one would remark upon your absence. It was a routine, understood and accepted by all. It was a small, quiet and constant dance of logistics, a system that allowed thousands of men to move as one while still accommodating the simple, undeniable needs of the individual. It was the Roman mind in microcosm, practical, disciplined and relentlessly efficient, even in the most private and mundane of moments. The sun has long since set, and the temporary fortress, which was a field of grass and dirt only hours ago, is now a small, ordered city, humming with a quiet, exhausted energy. The evening meal has been cooked and eaten. The murmur of conversation has faded as men clean their equipment or retire to their leather tents, 8 to a tent, packed tightly in rows that are as straight as the lines of a parade ground. The only light comes from the low, crackling campfires, their orange glow casting long, dancing shadows, and from the vast, silent canopy of stars overhead, a sight unobscured by the lights of any modern city. The air is cool and still, carrying the scent of wood smoke, damp earth, and the faint, collective smell of leather and wool. This is the time of the night watch. While the legion sleeps, it is never unguarded. The defense of the camp is a living, breathing thing, a responsibility that is passed from man to man through the darkest hours. Imagine yourself now, not tucked away in your tent, but standing on the earthen rampart, the sharpened stakes of the palisade, a dark fringe against the starry sky. Your shift has just begun. The cold of the night is a physical presence, slowly seeping through the thick wool of your cloak. You can feel the familiar weight of your shield on your arm, and your hand rests on the smooth, worn wood of your pilum, the heavy throwing spear that is your primary tool. The silence is profound, but it is not empty. It is a layered silence. From within the camp comes the soft, rhythmic breathing of thousands of sleeping men, a sound like a gentle tide. There is the occasional soft snort or stamp of a mule from the picket lines, and from beyond the ditch, from the dark, unknown wilderness, comes the sound of the natural world, the distant, mournful call of an owl, the rustle of some small creature in the dry leaves, the whisper of the wind moving through the tall pines. Your job is to listen to these sounds, to distinguish the normal from the abnormal, to be the eyes and ears of an army at rest. You walk your prescribed section of the wall. Your footsteps a soft, rhythmic crunch on the packed earth. You are not alone. Other sentries walk their own sections, distant, silent figures moving in the gloom. A centurion, or an optio, his second in command, makes the rounds, his approach signaled by the quiet, familiar clink of his armor. He exchanges a whispered word with you, the password for the night, ensuring that you are alert, that you are who you are supposed to be. This is the rhythm of the night, a slow, patient, and vigilant dance against the darkness. It is in this deep quiet, this heightened state of awareness, that the same simple human need can arise. An hour into your 2-hour watch, the warmth of the evening meal having long since faded, you feel the familiar pressure. The need is the same as it was on the march, but the context is entirely different. Here, on the rampart, you are a fixed point of defense. Leaving your post, even for a moment, is a far more serious breach of discipline. The integrity of the camp's entire defense relies on you being exactly where you are supposed to be. But the Roman army, in its boundless practicality, had a system for this as well. You would not simply abandon your post. You would wait until the next patrol by your superior. In a low whisper, you would state your need. It would not be seen as a weakness or a complaint. It would be seen as a logistical fact to be managed. The optio would call over another soldier, a man from a designated relief pool kept on light standby in a nearby tent for just such purposes. This man would take your position. He would be given the password, and he would assume your duty. Only then would you be permitted to leave. You walk down from the rampart and into the quiet grid of the camp. Your footsteps echo softly between the rows of dark, silent tents. Your destination is a specific, designated area. Even in a temporary camp, sanitation was planned. Just inside the rampart, a series of deep, narrow trenches would have been dug, separate from the main defensive ditch. This was the nighttime latrine. A simple wooden beam might be placed over the trench for balance. You find your way in the near darkness, the starlight providing just enough illumination. The process is the same as on the march. A quick, quiet, and efficient affair. And the final step is the most important. With a small shovel left nearby for the purpose, you cover your waist with a layer of earth from a waiting pile. The act is one of quiet respect for the sanctity of the camp, a final personal enforcement of the collective discipline. This discipline was not left to chance. It was the specific responsibility of designated officers. In permanent forts, these men were known as curatores cloacarum, the curators of the sewers. This was not a glamorous title, and it was often a duty assigned to junior officers or those tasked with unglamorous but essential work. Their job was to oversee the entire sanitation system of the fortress. Imagine the daily routine of such an officer. His morning would begin with an inspection of the main latrine. He would check the stone channels to ensure the water was flowing freely, that there were no blockages. He would oversee the crews of legionaries, often men assigned to cleaning duties as a minor punishment, as they scrubbed the long stone benches and sluiced the floors. He would inspect the supply of tersoria, ensuring the communal sponges were being properly rinsed and stored, and discarding any that were too old or worn. It was a mundane, thankless job, but it was as vital to the health of the legion as the work of the blacksmiths repairing armor, or the fletchers making arrows. The enforcement of these hygiene rules was a constant, low-level pressure. A soldier who was lazy or careless, who failed to cover his waist in the temporary camp latrine, would not be publicly shamed or flogged for a first offense. The Roman system was often more subtle and more practical. A centurion, making his morning rounds, would notice the infraction. He would not raise his voice. He would simply find the man responsible, and the man would find his name added to the roster for latrine cleaning duty for the next week. The punishment was work. The punishment was to be made intimately responsible for the very system you had disrespected. It was a lesson that was quickly and quietly learned. This obsession with sanitation was born from hard, brutal experience. Roman commanders knew that the greatest threat to their armies often came not from the points of enemy swords, but from within their own camp. An outbreak of dysentery, what we would call dysentery, could cripple a legion. It was a sickness that drained a man of his strength, that left him weak with fever and unable to march or fight. A sick soldier was not only unable to perform his duties, he was a drain on resources, requiring care and consuming rations while providing nothing in return. A widespread outbreak could turn a strong, proud legion into a column of weak, stumbling invalids. Therefore, the enforcement of hygiene discipline was not about abstract notions of cleanliness. It was about preserving combat strength. It was a matter of life and death, waged not with dramatic charges, but with shovels, brushes, and a calm, unyielding insistence on order, even in the dead of night, under the silent gaze of the stars. Let us now shift our focus from the broad mechanics of the system to the small human details that are so often lost to history. The Roman army was an institution of immense scale, but it was composed of individual men. Men who, despite their hardened discipline, still had moments of boredom, humor, and a deep longing for home. These quiet human impulses were not erased by the rigors of military life. They simply found different, subtler ways to express themselves, and sometimes they found their expression in the most unlikely of places. Imagine yourself, for a moment, not on the march or on the night watch, but enjoying a rare hour of downtime within the stone walls of a permanent fortress. You have finished your duties for the day. You find yourself in the communal latrine, not out of urgent need, but because it is, paradoxically, a semi-private space. The constant, gentle sound of the flowing water creates a curtain of noise, a background hum that allows for a moment of quiet contemplation, away from the watchful eyes of the centurions in the barracks yard. The air is cool, and the light from the high, unshuttered windows is soft and diffuse. You are sitting on the long, smooth stone bench, one of a dozen men, each lost in his own thoughts. It is in a place like this that you would find the forgotten literature of the common soldier. Graffiti. The plastered walls, weathered by damp and time, were the legionaries' chronicle. Here, with a sharp nail or a piece of charcoal, men left their mark. These were not grand inscriptions or imperial pronouncements. They were small human whispers. A crude caricature of a famously strict centurion, his nose drawn comically large. The name Gaius scratched into the stone, followed by the name of his hometown in Italy. A quiet declaration of identity in a world that demanded uniformity. And here, too, you would find humor. The jokes were simple, earthy, and universal. A scrawled comment like, Apollinaris, medicus titi imperatoris, hic cacavit bene, which translates to Apollinaris, the doctor of the Emperor Titus, had a good crap here. It is not high comedy, but you can almost hear the quiet chuckle of the man who wrote it, and the men who read it later. It is a small act of rebellion, a way of humanizing a purely functional space, of acknowledging the shared, unglamorous reality of their lives. It is a reminder that these men were not unthinking cogs in a machine. They were bored, they were witty, and they found humor in the most mundane of bodily functions. Reading these small messages, you feel a connection, a shared understanding with the men who sat in this exact spot years or even decades before you. The system may have been impersonal, but the experience within it was deeply human. This need to communicate, to leave a mark, extended beyond the latrine walls. Let us imagine that same soldier, later in the evening. The barracks are quiet. Most of his tent mates are asleep, their tired breathing a soft, rhythmic chorus in the crowded space. By the low, flickering light of a small oil lamp, he is attempting to write a letter home. His writing desk is his own knee. His paper is a tabula, a reusable wax tablet. 2 hinged pieces of wood with a shallow, recessed area filled with blackened beeswax. His pen is a stylus, a pointed metal tool with a flattened end, used for erasing mistakes by smoothing the wax. The process is slow and laborious. He carefully scratches the letters into the soft wax. What does he write? He does not write of the horrors of battle, for this is an era of peace. And even if it were not, he would not wish to worry his mother in her small village, or his wife tending to their farm. He writes of the things that fill his days. You can imagine the words forming slowly under his hand. The weather here in Britannia is always wet, he might scratch. The food is what you would expect. Plenty of wheat for porridge, but I miss the taste of your olive oil. He might mention a friend. I saw Lucius from the village next to ours. He is well. He complains about the marching, as we all do. And he might, in his own way, reference the very systems we have been exploring. He might write, My health is good. The camp is well run, and we have been free of the sicknesses that plagued the other legions. This simple sentence is a testament to the entire system of sanitation. He doesn't describe the digging of trenches or the cleaning of the latrines. He simply states the result. He is healthy. That is all his family needs to know. It is a quiet acknowledgement of the understated dignity of a well-run system. He ends his letter by smoothing the wax on the other side of the tablet to write the address. He will entrust it to a merchant or an official courier, and in a month or 2 or 3, this small, scratched message will be a voice from another world, read aloud in a sun-drenched Italian courtyard. The simple act of writing this letter of reaching across the vast expanse of the empire, is what keeps his humanity intact. It is a reminder that he is not just a number in a cohort, but a son, a husband, a brother. Now imagine the perspective of a different kind of soldier, not a Roman citizen from Italy, but a new recruit, an auxiliary from a newly conquered tribe in Gaul or Germania. Imagine his first few weeks in a Roman camp. He comes from a village of wood and thatch, where sanitation was a matter of convenience, where waste was simply thrown into a ditch or onto a refuse pile at the edge of the settlement. The concepts of systematic collective hygiene would be entirely foreign to him. Picture him entering the stone latrine for the first time. The scale of it, the coolness of the stone, the absence of overwhelming filth, the incredible, almost magical fact of constantly running water in a dedicated channel beneath his feet. It would be a moment of profound culture shock. He would see Roman legionaries, his conquerors, sitting together without shame, talking quietly as if they were in the forum. He would observe the use of the tersorium, the sponge on a stick, and the orderly way it was rinsed and stored. He would learn, perhaps through a sharp gesture from a centurion, that he was expected to use the same system. Later, on the march, he would be taught how to dig a proper cat hole. He might at first find it strange, this fastidious insistence on digging and covering, this seemingly pointless expenditure of effort. But as the weeks turn into months, he would begin to understand. He would see that the Roman camp did not smell of sickness. He would see that his fellow soldiers were not constantly struck down by fevers and fluxes, the common plagues of every other army he had ever known. He would come to see that the shovel was as important a tool of Roman power as the sword. The system was not about shame or privacy. It was about the health and strength of the group. The dignity was not in hiding the act, but in managing its consequences so effectively that it ceased to be a problem. He would learn that being Roman was not just about fighting in formation. It was about living in formation, right down to the most personal and forgotten details of daily life. What this all reveals is a core truth about the Roman mind. The same impulse for order that laid out roads in perfectly straight lines across the continent, that built aqueducts to carry water for 100 miles, and that codified laws for millions of people, was also applied to this most humble of problems. It was an expression of an astonishing ability to think at scale, to create systems that were robust, repeatable, and effective for thousands of people. It shows a profound pragmatism, an unsentimental focus on what worked. The Romans understood, in a way few other cultures did, that an empire is not maintained by grand gestures alone. It is maintained by a relentless, and often boring, attention to detail. The strength of the legion was not just in its sharp swords, but in its clean water. Its resilience was not just in its fortified walls, but in its well-dug trenches. And the forgotten details of how a soldier managed these quiet moments of his day are, in their own way, as impressive a testament to the power of Rome as any triumphant arch or towering Colosseum. Let us now broaden our view. We have walked in the sandals of the common legionary and the new recruit, men whose reality was defined by the earth beneath their feet and the pack on their backs. But the Roman camp was a society in miniature, a rigid hierarchy of status and privilege that was as unbreachable as the fortress walls themselves. To truly understand this world, we must leave the crowded barracks tent and step into the quiet, rarefied air of the high command. We must imagine the same day, the same needs, from the perspective of the man who commanded the legion, the legate. Imagine you are no longer a soldier among thousands, but the single man in charge. Your quarters are not a leather tent shared with 7 other men. You reside in the very center of the camp, in a building known as the Praetorium. This is not a tent, it is a house. It is a miniature Roman villa, transplanted from the rolling hills of Tuscany to this wild, foreign frontier. As you step inside, the sounds of the camp, the distant clatter from the smithy, the shouts from the training yard, fade away, replaced by a profound and insulated quiet. Your feet do not tread on packed earth, but on a mosaic floor, a complex pattern of tiny colored stones depicting a scene from mythology or a geometric design, cool and smooth under your fine leather slippers. The walls are not rough wood, but plaster, smoothed and painted with frescoes of gardens and birds, an illusion of a softer, more civilized world. Your morning does not begin with the blare of a horn. It begins with the soft, almost imperceptible presence of a personal slave, who has entered your sleeping chamber to open the heavy shutters and let in the morning light. He brings you a basin of warm water, scented with herbs. Your clothing laid out for you is not the coarse, functional wool of the legionary. It is woven from the finest material, its color a deep, rich crimson, the mark of your senatorial rank. It is lighter, more comfortable, and worn with an air of casual authority. Your breakfast is not a lump of hard bread chewed on the march. It is served to you on a small, polished wooden table in your private courtyard, a small, open-air garden in the center of the praetorium, complete with a bubbling fountain. You might have fresh bread, honey, cheese, and fruit, served on fine ceramic plates, accompanied by a cup of wine, heavily watered down, as was the custom. The burdens of your day are of a different nature entirely. They are not physical, but mental. They are the burdens of command, of strategy, of 1,000 complex decisions. You spend your morning not with a shovel, but with a scribe. He sits on a low stool before you, a roll of papyrus across his lap, his reed pen poised over an inkwell. You dictate letters, a report to the provincial governor, phrased with careful diplomatic language, a dispatch to the commander of a nearby fort, an order to your quartermaster, the Praefectus Castrorum, regarding a shortfall in the grain supply. Your words, spoken in a low, measured voice, will set dozens of men into motion, will alter the course of the coming week. Your weapon is not a sword, it is the spoken word. And when that same, universal biological need arises for you, the solution is not a walk to a communal trench. The Praetorium has its own facilities. Attached to your private bathing suite is a small, secluded latrine. This is a room of complete privacy. There is a single seat, perhaps carved from fine wood or marble, not unlike a throne in its solitary splendor. Below it, a channel has been dug, and your personal slaves will flush it with buckets of clean water after each use, ensuring it remains spotless and free of any odor. The experience is the complete inverse of the common soldier's. His was communal, functional, and public. Yours is solitary, luxurious, and utterly private. You do not use a shared tessorium. You might have your own, or use pieces of soft, fine linen, discarded after a single use. The very notion of sharing such a tool would be unthinkable for a man of your station. This immense difference in experience does not mean you are ignorant of the sanitation systems of the wider camp. On the contrary, you are obsessed with them, but from a great strategic height. On your desk, amongst the maps and troop rosters, is the weekly report from the Curatores Cloacarum. You read it with the same focused attention you would give a scouting report on enemy movements. It details the state of the main latrines, the condition of the drainage ditches, the amount of lime used for purification, and most importantly, the number of men reporting to the infirmary with stomach ailments. You see, for you, an outbreak of dysentery is not a personal misery. It is a catastrophic failure of command. It is a number on a ledger that translates to a critical reduction in your legion's combat effectiveness. A sick soldier is a number deducted from your total strength. A cohort laid low by fever is a weakness in your defensive line. It is a logistical nightmare that could jeopardize a campaign, halt an advance, and earn you a severe rebuke from the emperor himself. Your career, your reputation, and the safety of your entire command depend on the successful functioning of those humble latrines and the discipline of the men who use them. So, while you would never set foot in the communal latrine yourself, its proper functioning is one of your highest priorities. You approve the requisitions for new sea sponges from the Mediterranean without a second thought, understanding it is a necessary expense. You empower your centurions to enforce the hygiene discipline without mercy, knowing that their harshness in small matters prevents disaster in large ones. Your relationship with the Legion's sanitation is abstract, managerial, and utterly vital. You command the system, while the common soldier simply endures it. In this way, two separate realities coexist within the same camp walls. There is the world of the legionary, a physical world of shared labor, communal living, and the simple, earthy reality of digging a hole in the ground. And there is your world, the world of the legate, an intellectual world of maps, reports, private comfort, and the immense, lonely weight of responsibility. Both you and the lowest legionary are bound by the same inescapable human needs, but the solutions afforded to each of you reveal the vast, unbridgeable gulf of the Roman social order. A system of discipline for all, but of comfort, privacy, and quiet dignity for the powerful few. The world, you have come to learn, is divided into two distinct parts: the world inside the ditch and the world outside of it. As evening settles, you stand your turn on the rampart, looking not outward into the dark wilderness for signs of an enemy, but inward, into the heart of the camp. Below you, The final routines of the day are unfolding with the predictability of a water clock. The neat rows of tents glow with a soft, uniform warmth from the lamps inside. You can hear the low murmur of men cleaning their gear, the quiet clink of a whetstone on a sword's edge, the ordered sounds of a great machine settling into rest. The air smells of wood smoke and clean wool. This is your world, a universe of straight lines, shared purpose, and meticulous, life-sustaining order. Then, you turn around. You look out, beyond the deep, dark line of the defensive ditch, beyond the sharpened stakes of the palisade, and you see another city, a city of pure light and noise that clings to the fortress walls like a sprawling, living vine. This is the Vicus, the civilian settlement that springs into existence wherever a legion puts down roots for more than a few months. It is a chaotic, vibrant, and utterly necessary parasite, and it is everything the legion is not. Where the camp is a grid, the Vicus is a tangled web of muddy tracks. Where the camp is silent and orderly, the Vicus is a riot of sound and energy. The light here is not the steady glow of military-issue lamps, but the wild dancing flicker of countless torches and open fires. The sound is not the quiet murmur of disciplined soldiers, but a cacophony of life. The shouting of merchants from a dozen different provinces hawking their wares. The loud, unrestrained laughter spilling from a tavern. The music of a strange, foreign-stringed instrument. The crying of a baby. The barking of dogs. This world outside the ditch has its own population, sometimes rivaling the legion itself in number. It is a population of merchants who have followed the army to sell the soldiers the small luxuries they crave. Better wine, different foods, scented oils. It is a population of artisans, blacksmiths who can offer a custom repair, leather workers, potters, and it is a population of families. The Roman army did not officially permit soldiers to marry, but reality was far messier. Many legionaries formed unofficial families with local women, raising children who lived their entire lives in the shadow of the fortress walls. The Vicus was their home. With a nod from your centurion, you are granted a few hours of leave. You walk down from the rampart, cross a guarded wooden bridge over the ditch, and step into this other world. The change is immediate and assaults the senses. The air is thick with 1,000 new smells. A rich, confusing stew of grilling meat seasoned with exotic spices. Cheap, sweet perfume, unwashed bodies, and the ever-present acrid smell of animal waste. The ground beneath your feet is no longer the firm, packed earth of the camp, but a treacherous mud littered with refuse. You sidestep a pile of discarded vegetable peels and the gnawed-at bones of a chicken. You see women washing clothes in a trough of murky water, their chatter a fast, incomprehensible stream of a local dialect. Everything is closer, more crowded, more intensely alive. And here, the fundamental question arises once more. In this chaotic, unregulated city of transients, how is the universal need managed? The answer is poorly. There are no curatores cloacarum here. There is no master plan, no communal system, no flowing water channels. Sanitation is a private, desperate, and ad hoc affair. A tavern owner might have dug a simple, deep pit toilet behind his establishment for his patrons, but its maintenance is haphazard at best. A family living in a small wooden shack simply uses a bucket, which is then emptied onto a refuse heap at the edge of the settlement. There are no rules about covering one's waste. The concept of collective hygiene, the bedrock of the legion's health, simply does not exist here. The ditches run thick with filth, and the flies are a constant buzzing plague. You see this not with judgment, but with the trained eye of a Roman soldier. You see the disorder, and you instinctively understand the danger it represents. The Vicus is a reservoir of potential sickness. The same water source that might be contaminated by the settlement's waste could seep into the ground and poison the wells the legion uses. A fly that lands on a refuse heap in the Vicus could, minutes later, land on the bread of a soldier inside the camp. The constant traffic of soldiers moving back and forth between these two worlds creates 100 daily opportunities for disease to breach the legion's defenses. And so, the army does what it can to manage the threat from beyond the ditch. The relationship is one of contained tolerance. The Vicus is necessary for morale, a vital steam valve for the pressures of military life. But it is also a biological threat. The Legion's commanders might dispatch a patrol, not to police the civilians, but to enforce a few critical rules. They might forbid the dumping of waste upstream from the fortress. They may establish official refuse sites, attempting to contain the filth in one designated area. Guards at the camp gates might become stricter. insisting that soldiers returning from a night of drinking in the taverns scrape the mud and filth from their sandals before re-entering the clean, ordered space of the camp. The ditch, you realize, is more than a defensive line against a barbarian charge. It is a quarantine line, a sanitary cordon designed to protect the health of the Legion from the chaos it allows to fester just outside its walls. You find what you were looking for, a small food stall run by a Syrian merchant, and for a few small coins, you buy a piece of honey cake, a sweet, sticky taste of a world far from your standard-issue rations. You eat it slowly, standing in the crowded, muddy lane, a quiet observer of the life teeming around you. You see the vibrancy, the freedom from the rigid discipline that governs your every waking hour. But you also see the precariousness of it all. You see the dirt, you smell the sickness in the air, and you find yourself feeling a strange sense of comfort in the knowledge of the clean, ordered, and predictable world that waits for you just a few hundred paces away. Later you make your way back. As you approach the guarded bridge, the chaotic noise of the vicus fades behind you. You present yourself to the sentry, your footsteps sounding loud on the wooden planks. You step off the bridge and back onto the packed earth of the Roman camp. The air here is instantly cleaner, cooler. The silence is broken only by the familiar, comforting sounds of the sentries on the wall. You walk back towards your tent, past the neat, orderly rows, and the contrast is more powerful than ever before. The world outside the ditch is a world of individual survival. The world inside the ditch is a world of collective strength. And you understand, perhaps more clearly than ever, that the simple, boring, and relentless discipline of hygiene is the invisible wall that truly keeps the two worlds apart. The campaign season is over. The first snows have dusted the high peaks, and the Legion has settled into the familiar rhythms of winter in a permanent fortress. The relentless marching is a memory, replaced by the routine of drills, maintenance, and the eternal quiet war against boredom. But now, a new element enters your life. A courier arrives from Rome, his horse lathered and steaming in the cold air, carrying a bundle of sealed scrolls. The news spreads through the barracks in a ripple of excited whispers. Orders have come. Your cohort is being reassigned. You are not going home. You are being sent east to a different frontier, to a different world. You are going to see. For you, a legionary who has spent his entire adult life on solid ground, whose world has been defined by the feel of the road beneath your sandals, the prospect is as alien as a journey to the moon. The journey to the port city is a standard march, but your destination is not a field upon which to build a camp, but a bustling, chaotic harbour. The air here tastes and smells different, thick with the sharp, clean scent of salt, and the less pleasant aroma of drying fish, wet ropes, and bilge water. The familiar sounds of the camp are gone, replaced by the cry of gulls, the groan of timber, and the shouting of sailors in a dozen different languages. Your cohort is marched onto a massive ship. It is not a sleek, oared warship, a trireme built for speed and ramming. It is a Roman transport, a great, broad-beamed, round-hulled merchant vessel, built not for battle, but for capacity. It is a floating warehouse, designed to carry grain or wine, or in this case, a cohort of Roman soldiers. You and your comrades, nearly 500 of you, are directed below decks. You descend a steep, narrow ladder into a space that will be your entire world for the next several weeks. The space is vast, dark, and cavernous. The only light filters down from the hatches on the main deck, illuminating swirling clouds of dust motes in the gloomy air. The ceiling is a low, dense web of massive wooden beams. The air is thick and stagnant, heavy with the smell of old wood, tar, and the ghosts of 1,000 previous cargoes. There are no barracks here, no neat grids. You are simply assigned a space on the rough wooden floorboards. A space just large in which to lay out your bedroll between two of the great curved ribs of the ship's hull. Your entire cohort is packed into this dark, swaying space, shoulder to shoulder. The disciplined, orderly spacing of the camp is gone, replaced by a dense, suffocating proximity. The ship leaves the harbour. You feel a new motion, a deep, slow, and utterly relentless rocking and rolling that you feel in the pit of your stomach. The familiar, solid earth is gone, replaced by a world that is never, ever still. For the first few days, many of the men are afflicted with seasickness. They are not hardened sailors, and the constant, unpredictable motion of the sea is a profound physical trial. The cramped space is filled with the wretched sounds and smells of men being violently ill. The discipline of the Legion is tested in a new way, not by the threat of an enemy, but by the misery of the body itself. And in this new, floating and intensely crowded world, the same fundamental, practical problem presents itself with a new and terrifying urgency. There is no earth in which to dig a hole. There is no space to walk away from the group. So how is this managed? The solution is a testament to Roman naval architecture and pragmatism, though it is a far cry from the elegant, water-flushed latrines of a permanent fort. At the very front of the ship, in the prow, and sometimes also at the stern, small sections of the deck would be built, jutting out over the water. These were the ship's latrines. They were essentially wooden boxes or benches, open to the air and sea, with holes cut in them. To use them, you would have to leave the dark, stuffy confines of the lower deck, climb the ladder to the main deck, and make your way forward, your legs unsteady on the lurching, swaying planks. The wind and sea spray would be a constant presence. Here, high above the waves, with the vast, empty expanse of the sea all around you, you would attend to your needs. Waste fell directly into the ocean below, to be instantly carried away by the ship's wake. For the soldiers, this system was both a relief and a new kind of trial. The fresh, salt air was a welcome respite from the foul atmosphere below decks, but the location itself was perilous. On a calm day, it was straightforward enough. But in rough seas, with the ship pitching and rolling violently, it was a place of genuine danger. You would have to brace yourself against the railing, your knuckles white as the deck fell away beneath you, green water crashing over the bow just a few feet away. One slip, one moment of inattention, and you could be pitched into the churning sea, a fate from which there was almost no chance of rescue. The ship would not and could not turn around for a single man. Discipline was maintained by the same low-level pressure as on land. A designated junior officer was responsible for the cleanliness of these areas, ensuring that they were swabbed down regularly, and access was controlled. A man could not simply go whenever he pleased. The ladders were narrow, and the main deck was a busy working space, crowded with sailors managing the ropes and the great single sail. A centurion would control the flow of men moving up from below, ensuring that the deck did not become dangerously overcrowded. For the men below deck, waiting their turn, the situation was often dire. In bad weather, the hatches would be battened down, sealing them in the dark, swaying belly of the ship for days at a time. In these conditions, going up on deck was impossible. Large wooden buckets, sealed with pitch to make them waterproof, were the only option. It was a grim, unpleasant necessity, a reversion to the most basic of solutions. A team of men, usually those being punished for some minor infraction, would be tasked with the dangerous, stomach-turning job of hauling these heavy, sloshing buckets up to the deck when the weather finally broke, and emptying them over the side. The experience of a sea voyage was a profound shock to the system of a land-based army. It stripped away the comforting certainties of the camp and the road. It took away the very ground beneath their feet. It showed them that their meticulous systems of sanitation, so effective on land, were vulnerable to the raw, untamable power of the ocean. A legionary who completed such a journey, who finally felt the solid, unmoving ground of a new province beneath his feet, would never again take the simple act of digging a hole in the earth for granted. He would have learned, in a deep and visceral way, that order and discipline are not the natural state of the world, but a fragile, man-made fortress, built and maintained with constant effort against a vast ocean of chaos. The long sea voyage is finally over. The coast of a new continent, perhaps North Africa, or the shores of Judea, has risen from the horizon and solidified into a landscape of rock, sand, and unfamiliar vegetation. The ship has docked, and you have stumbled ashore, your legs still unaccustomed to the solid, unmoving earth. After weeks in the twilight world of the ship's hold, the brilliant, harsh sunlight of this new land is almost painful to the eyes. The air is hot, dry, and filled with the scent of dust and strange, spicy aromas you cannot name. Your cohort reforms on the docks, a slow, clumsy process as men retrieve their gear and adjust to being on land. The familiar discipline begins to reassert itself. The centurions' voices, sharp and clear, cut through the noise of the harbour. The ranks straighten, the column forms, and you begin to march. This is a new frontier, a different world, but the rhythm of the legionary's life remains the same. You march, and at the end of the day, you build a camp. But this is not the green, temperate land of Gaul or Britannia. This is the desert. The ground is not soft turf, but a hard, sun-baked crust of sand and stone. The familiar forests are gone, replaced by endless vistas of rolling dunes and barren, rocky hills. The sun is not a gentle warmth, but a relentless, oppressive force, beating down from a flawless, pale blue sky. Your wool tunic, so practical in the cooler climates of Europe, is now a suffocating torment. The sweat pours from you, stinging your eyes and soaking your clothes, leaving white, salty tide marks as it dries. Your most precious commodity is no longer food, but water. The legion's progress is dictated not by the endurance of the men, but by the location of the next well. The desert presents a new and profound challenge to the Roman way of sanitation. The fundamental principles, so effective in Europe, are now turned on their heads. The first and most critical problem is water. In the temperate north, water was abundant. It was a tool to be used, diverted into channels to flush away waste. Here, in the desert, every single drop is more precious than gold. The idea of using water to clean a latrine is an absurdity, a form of madness. All water must be reserved for drinking. To use it for any other purpose is to risk the life of the entire legion, and so the familiar systems are adapted. When the legion builds its nightly camp, the latrine trenches are still dug. The discipline of creating a designated area for waste remains, but there is no water to flush them. The substitute is the most abundant local resource: sand. After using the trench, a soldier is required to use his shovel not just to cover his own waste, but to throw a layer of clean, dry sand over the entire trench. The sand, baked by the sun, is sterile and desiccating. It absorbs moisture and helps to reduce the smell. It is a dry flush, an ingenious adaptation of an old technique to a new and hostile environment. The second problem is the very nature of the ground itself. In Europe, digging a hole was a straightforward task. Here, the ground can be as hard as rock. The top layer of sand gives way to a hard pan of baked clay or solid stone. Digging the nightly latrine trench, a task that might take an hour in Gaul, can take 3 or 4 hours of back-breaking labor under the relentless sun. The dalabra, the legionary's pickaxe, becomes more important than the shovel. The sound of the camp being built is different here. It is not the soft scrape of shovels in earth, but the sharp, rhythmic clink, clink, clink of dozens of pickaxes striking stone, a desperate metallic chorus against the immense silence of the desert. The men work in shifts, their bodies slick with sweat, their muscles straining to carve a shallow trench from the unyielding ground. The simple act of sanitation has become a monumental daily struggle against the environment itself. Even the tersorium, the humble sponge on a stick, is a casualty of the desert. Sea sponges are a luxury from a distant world. They are not available here. Instead, the soldiers must use whatever is at hand. Perhaps a handful of dry, coarse grass, or a smooth, flat stone, carefully chosen and then discarded. The standard of personal hygiene inevitably falls. The quiet confidence of the clean, well-run system of a permanent fortress is replaced by a gritty, make-do pragmatism. The greatest challenge, however, is the unseen enemy that the desert breeds so well: the fly. Flies are a constant, maddening presence, drawn by the scent of men, animals, and waste. In the dry, hot air, disease can spread with terrifying speed. The legion's medical officers, the Medici, are more vigilant than ever. They understand that the desiccating power of the sun and sand is their greatest ally. They might order that the latrine trenches be dug in the most sun-exposed part of the camp, allowing the fierce sunlight to bake the waste and kill the bacteria. They might experiment with local materials, discovering that the ash from a certain type of desert plant, when sprinkled in the trenches, has antiseptic properties. The entire legion becomes more aware of the fragility of its health. A man who gets sick here is a grave liability. There are no lush fields to forage in, no friendly villages to trade with. The legion is a self-contained bubble of life, moving slowly through a dead land, connected to the outside world only by a thin, vulnerable supply line of camels and mules. To fall ill here is to stare death in the face, and so the discipline of hygiene, however difficult, becomes more important than ever. A soldier who neglects to cover his waist with sand is not just being lazy, he is endangering every single one of his comrades. The punishment for such an infraction in the desert would be swift and severe, for it is an act of profound betrayal. Imagine the nightly routine. The sun finally dips below the horizon, and the oppressive heat gives way to a surprising, bone-chilling cold. You huddle around a small fire, fueled not by plentiful wood, but by the dry, gnarled roots of desert shrubs, a fuel that burns quickly and gives off little heat. You look out from the rampart, not at a dark, rustling forest, but at a landscape of alien shapes bathed in the impossibly bright light of the moon and stars. The silence is absolute, a ringing in the ears. It is in this vast, empty, and unforgiving landscape that you truly understand the genius of the Roman system. It was not a rigid, unchanging set of rules. It was a philosophy of order, discipline, and above all, relentless adaptation. Whether in the wet forests of the north, on the chaotic waves of the sea, or in the burning heart of the desert, the core principles remained the same. Control what you can control. Create order where there is none. And never, ever underestimate the importance of a well-dug hole. Years have passed. Your hair is now streaked with grey, your face a testament to the sons of a dozen different provinces. You have marched on Roman roads, sailed the great sea, and felt the sands of the desert beneath your sandals. The relentless cycle of marching and building, of discipline and duty, has carved itself into your very being. Finally, after 25 years of service, the day you have long dreamed of has arrived. You are to be honorably discharged. The ceremony is simple but profound. You stand on the parade ground of the fortress, the same ground where you drilled as a young recruit. The legate himself presides. Your name is called out. You step forward. You are presented with a diploma, a small bronze tablet, a legal document confirming your service and, most importantly, granting you the full rights of a Roman citizen. You are also given your severance pay, a significant sum of money, enough to buy a small plot of land. You are no longer Legionary Gaius of the 10th cohort. You are now Gaius Vibius, a citizen of Rome, a veteran, a free man. You decide not to return to your ancestral home in Italy, a place you now barely remember. Instead, you use your severance pay to buy a small farm in the countryside of the province where you last served, perhaps in the rolling hills of southern Gaul. The land is fertile, the climate is mild. You build a small, modest farmhouse, using the practical skills of construction you learned building countless camps. Your new life begins, a life governed not by the centurion's call, but by the slow, gentle turning of the seasons. The rhythm of your days is now one of peace. You wake with the sun, not a trumpet blast. You spend your days tending to your olive grove, pruning the trees with a patient, practiced hand. You cultivate a small vineyard. You keep a few chickens and a goat. The sounds that fill your world are no longer the crunch of marching feet, but the buzz of bees in your garden, the rustle of wind in the olive leaves, the distant, gentle lowing of a neighbor's cattle, the constant, low-level tension of military life, a tension you were so used to you barely noticed it, has finally drained away, leaving a quiet sense of calm you have not felt since you were a boy. One of the first things you build on your new farm is a latrine. You are not a wealthy man. You cannot afford a grand mosaic floor or a private water-flush chamber like your old legate. But you are a Roman veteran, and you have a lifetime of practical knowledge. You choose your site with the care of a military engineer. You place it at the edge of your property, downhill and downstream from your well and your house, ensuring the water supply remains pure. You dig a deep, neat rectangular pit. You construct a small, sturdy wooden shelter over it, with a solid roof to keep out the rain, and a simple, comfortable wooden bench inside. It is a humble structure, but it is built to last. It is clean, it is functional, and it is private. Sometimes your neighbors come to visit. They are local Gauls, their families having lived on this land for generations. They are good people, friendly and hard-working. You share wine with them, you trade stories. You notice with the detached eye of a former soldier that their own farms are different from yours. Their homes are clustered together, their fields less organized. And you notice their sanitation is what you would expect. A simple pit, dug close to the house, rarely cleaned, attracting flies. You don't judge them. It is simply the way things have always been done here. One day, your neighbor's son falls ill with a fever and a terrible stomach ailment. The local healer comes, offers prayers to the old gods, and prescribes herbal remedies. The boy remains sick for weeks. You, meanwhile, have a family of your own now, and your children are strong and healthy. They are rarely sick. You know with a certainty born of decades of experience that it is not a matter of luck or divine favor. You know it is because your well is clean. You know it is because you built your latrine in the right place and in the right way. The simple, boring, relentless discipline you learned in the Legion is now protecting your own family. The lessons of the camp have become the foundations of your home. As you grow older, the Roman world around you continues its own march. A new road is built through the valley, surveyed and paved by the soldiers of the local legion, straight as an arrow's flight. A small market town springs up at the crossroads, and with it comes a public bathhouse, a small aqueduct, and a public latrine, built on the same principles as the great ones in the military forts. You see the slow, steady imposition of Roman order onto the landscape. The local people begin to adopt these new ways, not because they are forced to, but because they see that they work. They see that the towns with aqueducts are healthier than the villages that rely on wells. They see that the children who grow up in homes with proper sanitation are stronger. You sit on the porch of your farmhouse in the evenings, watching the sunset over your olive trees. You are a man of peace now, a farmer. The sword and shield you once carried are stored away, cleaned and oiled, relics of a former life. But you realize that the most important things you carried with you from your time in the army were not the weapons, it was the knowledge. The knowledge of how to build, how to organize, how to create order out of chaos. You learned that the strength of Rome was not just in its ability to conquer, but in its ability to administer. It was in its relentless, practical, and often invisible systems of logistics and public health. You think back to all the latrines you have known, the great water-flushed stone halls of a permanent fortress, the simple covered trenches of a marching camp, the perilous windswept boxes on the deck of a ship, the sand-filled pits of the desert. They were all different, all adapted to their environment, but they all served the same fundamental purpose. They were the physical manifestation of an idea, the idea that the health and discipline of the group are paramount, that order must be created, and that even the most humble and private of human needs can, and must, be managed with intelligence and forethought. You look at the small, sturdy latrine at the edge of your own property, and you see it not as an outhouse, but as a monument, a quiet, humble monument to the enduring and truly civilized legacy of the Roman legion. The fields have been harvested. The olive press has fallen silent. The nights are growing longer, colder, and you spend more time indoors, by the warmth of your hearth, watching the flames dance. You are an old man now. The strength that once allowed you to march 20 miles with a heavy pack has settled into a deep, quiet stillness. Your days are measured not by the orders of a centurion, but by the slow, predictable path of the sun across the sky. Your world has become small, peaceful, and contained. But beyond the stone walls of your farm, the larger world, the Roman world you served for a quarter of a century, is beginning to fray at the edges, like a well-worn cloak. The change is not dramatic. There is no invading army, no great collapse. It is a slow, creeping neglect, a quiet unwinding of the great machine. The main road that runs through the valley, the one you remember the legion paving with such precision, is not maintained as it once was. The stones are still there, a testament to the genius of its builders, but weeds now grow thick in the cracks. Winter rains wash away the earth at its edges, and the ruts from heavy wagons are not filled in as quickly. The journey to the local town now takes a little longer, is a little less comfortable. The legion patrols, once a common and reassuring sight, are less frequent now. Their armor, you notice, is not always as well repaired. Their discipline seems a little less sharp. The empire is overstretched, its resources thin. The relentless, grinding work of maintenance is beginning to falter. In the nearby town, the fountain in the main square, fed by the small aqueduct the army built a generation ago, sometimes sputters and fails. A section of the channel might be blocked with leaves or silt, and it takes weeks, not days, for a crew to be organized to fix it. The flow of clean, constant water, once the lifeblood of the town, is no longer something to be taken for granted. You see it, and you understand what it means. You understand that the system, the great invisible network of order and logistics that you were a part of, requires constant energy, constant attention. And its energy is fading. The great river of Roman order is slowing, its powerful current weakening, its banks beginning to crumble. You watch it happen, not with fear, but with a deep, quiet melancholy. The way an old sailor watches the tide go out, knowing it is a natural cycle, but feeling the loss of its power all the same. Let us now step forward in time, leap across 2 full centuries. The old veteran is long gone, his bones resting in the earth of the farm he loved. The farmhouse itself is still standing, but it is a different place. The roof has been patched with rougher, darker shingles. The original, well-fitted stone walls have been supplemented with crude field stones and mud mortar. The world has changed utterly. Your name is Odo, and you are the veteran's great-great-grandson, though you do not know this. The story of the soldier who first settled this land is lost, a forgotten tale from a forgotten time. Your world is smaller, darker, and more dangerous than his ever was. The great Roman road at the bottom of the valley is gone. It is now just a wide, muddy track, a treacherous path in the wet season. The perfectly cut paving stones have been prized up over generations, carted away to build the defensive walls of the local lord's fortified hall, or used as the foundation for a church. The aqueduct that once fed the town is now a picturesque ruin, a line of broken stone arches marching across the landscape, their original purpose a complete mystery. You look at them and see the work of giants, or perhaps of ancient magicians. The idea that ordinary men could build such a thing is beyond comprehension. Your life is governed by the immediate needs of survival. You work the same fields as the veteran, but your tools are cruder, your harvests less certain. And your life is shadowed by something the veteran had learned to conquer. Constant, low-level sickness. Fevers, fluxes and summer plagues are an accepted, unavoidable part of life. The well your family uses, dug in the same spot the veteran chose, is now often murky. Your own home's sanitation is a simple affair. Waste from the house is thrown into a shallow pit a few paces from your door. The pit smells, it attracts swarms of flies in the summer, and when it rains heavily, the filth can overflow, running in greasy rivulets across your yard. You do not think of it as unsanitary. It is simply the way things are done. It is the way everyone does things. The knowledge of how and why to do it differently has vanished from the world as completely as the legion that once practiced it. One day, while digging a new post hole for a fence, your shovel strikes something hard. You dig around it and uncover the remains of the veteran's latrine. You find a deep pit filled with dark, rich earth, and the rotten, collapsed timbers of the small shelter he built over it. You are puzzled. You do not understand what it is. Perhaps you think it was an old well that ran dry, or a strange small cellar for a building that is long gone. The idea that this was a dedicated, carefully sited structure for managing human waste does not occur to you. The very concept has been lost. Its function is as mysterious to you as the great broken arches of the aqueduct on the horizon. You and the other people of your village live in the midst of the solutions to your greatest problems, but you cannot see them. You visit the ruins of the nearby Roman town, a place your ancestors called a civitas. It is now a ghost of itself, a collection of crumbling walls and rubble-strewn streets. You and your friends dare each other to explore the most imposing ruin, what was once the public bathhouse. Inside you find a vast echoing chamber with a collapsed roof, and in a side room you find a strange and wondrous sight, a long curving bench of smooth stone with a series of identical keyhole-shaped openings carved into it. Below it you can see a deep, stone-lined channel, now filled with dirt and weeds. You are filled with awe. You cannot imagine its purpose. You run your hand over the cool, smooth stone. What kind of people required such a thing? Was it a throne room for a council of kings? A place for punishing prisoners in some bizarre fashion? The mundane, practical truth that it was a place where dozens of people sat together to use the toilet is so far outside your lived experience that it is literally unthinkable. You see magic or royalty or unfathomable power. You do not see a solution to the dysentery that took your younger sister last autumn. The knowledge is gone. The sound of flowing water has been replaced by the mournful whistle of wind through the ruins of a forgotten, healthier world. Let us let the centuries drift by again, like dust motes in a sunbeam. We find ourselves in a different part of the old empire. A new kind of order is slowly, painstakingly being built. Not by an army, but by communities of monks. Imagine a monastery being constructed in a secluded, wooded valley. The men who build it are driven by a devotion to God. But their communal life presents the same practical challenges that the Roman legion faced. 100 men, living together in close quarters, must eat, must sleep, and must manage their waste. The abbot of this monastery is a thoughtful man. He has read the old texts, not just the scriptures, but ancient treatises on architecture and medicine that have been preserved in the monastery's library. He has also observed the world around him. He has seen the ruins of a nearby Roman villa, and has noted the clever way its builders channeled water from a stream to flush their drains. And so, when his own monastery is designed, he includes a specific building, known as a reredoter, or necessarium. He directs the builders to construct it over the fastest flowing part of the stream that runs through the valley. It is a long stone building, with a row of wooden stalls inside, each with a hole that opens directly to the flowing water below. The water, a constant cleansing current, carries all the waste away, far downstream from the monastery's well and its kitchen. The monks who use it do not think of it as a Roman invention. They see it as a wise and practical solution, a gift of logic and good planning that allows them to live a healthier, cleaner, more orderly life, a life more fitting for the service of God. But what they have created, through a combination of preserved knowledge and practical rediscovery, is an almost perfect echo of the Roman military latrine. The quiet discipline of the monk kneeling for his prayers, mirrors the quiet discipline of the legionary, digging a trench. Both are part of a system that understands that collective health is a foundation for a higher purpose. The sound of flowing water, silent for so many centuries, can be heard once more. This slow, halting rediscovery eventually spreads beyond the monastery walls. As the cramped, filthy cities of the medieval world grow, they are repeatedly ravaged by plagues made infinitely worse by the lack of sanitation. Thinkers, engineers, and rulers begin to grapple with the immense problem of urban filth. They begin to experiment, to design the first city-wide sewer systems since the fall of Rome. They see it as a bold, modern innovation, a triumph of a new scientific age. But they are, in reality, retracing the footsteps of their forgotten ancestors. They are relearning the lost science that the Roman Curatores Cloacarum had perfected 2,000 years before. They are rebuilding the invisible infrastructure of civilization. And so, our long journey comes full circle. We began with the simple, rhythmic sound of sandals on a gravel road, and we end here, in a place of quiet reflection. The story of how the Roman soldier managed this simple, daily need is not just a curious detail. It is a parable about knowledge itself. It shows us how a society can build systems of astonishing ingenuity, systems that are fundamental to its health and power. And it shows us how easily, how quickly, that knowledge can be lost. How the solutions can lie in plain sight, in the ruins of a broken aqueduct or a mysterious stone bench, yet remain unseen for 1,000 years. The legacy of the Legion is not just in the great monuments that still stand. It is in the quiet foundational ideas that had to be painstakingly learned all over again. The idea that clean water is more valuable than gold, that discipline is a shield against chaos, and that the health, strength, and ultimate success of any group of people depends, in no small part, on the humble, unglamorous, and profound wisdom of a well-dug hole. The next time you turn a tap and clean water flows without thought or effort, perhaps you will remember this long, slow journey, and you will hear, in that simple, gentle sound, the distant, quiet echo of a Roman engineer, a medieval monk, and the countless forgotten legionaries who, with their shovels and their discipline, helped to build a healthier world, lose it, and inspire its rebirth.